We kind of know Cypherpunk is basically a Bitcoin holding company, maybe similar in structure to MicroStrategy, which the U.S. audience might be more familiar with. But it seems like recently you've been investing more heavily in Solana.
That's absolutely right. And first of all, Tim and Katie, thank you so much for having me on. We've been very interested in the Solana ecosystem. Obviously, there's been dynamics at play for Ethereum and Bitcoin and their growth, and also maybe some hiccups along the way. But for the Solana ecosystem, we're seeing large development from the platforms, from the infrastructure, for the community. And it's very important to note, for the growth and sustainability of a token and its blockchain is how well that ecosystem and the community developers are building on that ecosystem and engaged.
Leah, is this something you're going to continue to do? Sell Bitcoin exposure, lessen that Bitcoin exposure, and increase Solana exposure? What can investors sort of take away from the strategy moving forward?
As of now, you can see from the public statements that that has been the strategy. We're very interested in following Solana and the movements of Sol moving forward.
What would be sort of a typical asset allocation in the end? Like, what's the target asset allocation?
So we're also ramping up our staking operations. So we're interested in not only the price movements and holding Sol on the balance sheet, but also being an active participant in the Sol and Solana staking ecosystem. So from an operations perspective, we're trying to engage and enhance performance. As for asset allocation, things are definitely changing at Cypherpunk Holdings. So I hope you stay tuned.
Well, definitely going to stay tuned there. But I'm curious about, given that, one of the goals is accumulation here, how do you view pullbacks in the market? You think about the volatility recently that we've seen in Bitcoin, for example, really dipping below 60,000, getting close to 50,000, now back up close to 60,000. Was that an opportunity that you seized on to add more?
I think the market is very interesting right now. You're absolutely right. We've seen a muted demand from traditional institutional investors over the summer. And also, I think that's likely a shakeout of potential seed providers in the Bitcoin ETFs. With volatility, risk parameters may also be hitting uncomfortable levels for investment committees. On the Ethereum side, I think that that's been interesting and mixed as well. I mean, on the one hand, they have not accumulated as much AUM as analysts expected and issuers wanted, given where fees sit. However, on the protocol level, and this is also why we're working and looking at Solana, I think it's been immensely successful, given there's been no major hiccups in the network. So Ethereum's capital market structure is vastly different from Bitcoin. And issuers right now holding $7 billion already represents more than 2% of Ethereum's net market value. So in Ethereum, you have staking and restaking, which is a bit of a daisy chain of locked up tokens. And this could have tripped up the ability to source ETH, but it hasn't so far. There's also dynamics within the Bitcoin ecosystem that could have tripped up, and they haven't so far. So I think that that's really interesting. Of course, outside the United States, though, we have seen an increase in demand for Bitcoin. And I think that, it's important to note that, yes, we're looking at AUM accumulation within the Bitcoin ETFs or large whale trades as indicative of overall demand for Bitcoin, but much is taking place on the individual level where wealth is relative, or nation state policy level where expectations and actions, have been publicly discussed.
So, of course, you're a publicly listed company. Your ticker is HODL, HODL, of course. What is your pitch to potential shareholders, to potential investors? Because I could see one of the pushbacks here being, why wouldn't I just buy a spot Bitcoin ETF, either in the US or in Canada, where they've been listed for years? Why buy shares of HODL versus just going into an ETF?
I think that's a great question. Originally, when HODL was trading in 2018, we were that go-to exposure play for Bitcoin. Since then, we've advanced and grown, and as of right now, being highly focused on holding Solana, staking Solana, as well as being engaged as a Solana infrastructure player, staking infrastructure player. I think that investors who are looking for exposure to Sol, pre-Sol ETF, should be interested in what we're doing right now.
Leah, we're fewer than 90 days away from the presidential election here in the U.S. And we're talking to a lot of our guests about what candidates mean for the crypto landscape. And I'm wondering, in your view, who's better for Cypherpunk? Who's better for crypto? Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
Quite the question. I mean, it has been, as we all know, a very difficult 4 years. We've all had black eyes in the industry. It's been difficult on the banking level. It's been difficult, obviously, as a former issuer, to work with, Chairman Gensler on getting approvals. We actually, at Valkyrie, first filed for a Bitcoin spot ETF in January 2021. So it was a long road. As for which candidate, when elected, could be quote unquote better for Bitcoin, obviously to be determined. We're still waiting for a strategy to be more explicit in the Harris camp, but I think that it will come out. I think that in the end of the day, we're seeing a different inning right now with the traditional finance players in the market, as well as pushing on a very educational level cryptocurrency, platform education. So I am positive and optimistic that either administration will provide guidance in positive light for the cryptocurrency industry.